I put this video together because the residential real estate marketplace has some very unique words and concepts that are all their own. And those of us that are in the business end up using shorthand or using these words all the time in a way that some people don't understand just because we're familiar with them. Or sometimes we use those words to be condescending, to explain that we know more than you do. So if you wouldn't mind executing that TDS and the SPQ and getting that over to me right away, I'd appreciate it. So these phrases and words come up almost every conversation that I have with somebody, whether they're selling a house or buying a house. Oftentimes, the concepts are generally understood, but the specific meanings are not, and they're very important. So let's take a look at a few of them. Escrow. Now, escrow is a word that is further complicated because it has two different meanings and usages. So the first usage of the word is the specific company, the escrow company that's involved in a transaction. Now, for people that are from out of state, oftentimes real estate closings are done with an attorney. In California, we use an escrow company. It's essentially a third-party, non-related institution that not only handles the money, but they also handle the wishes and guidance of everybody involved in the transaction. So there's buyers and sellers and lenders and title companies and all different sorts of individuals that are involved. What happens is each of those people, each of those entities, have specific things that they want to have happen. For example, the buyer wants to bring their dollars into the escrow company, they want to borrow money, and in return, they want to get ownership of the real estate. The seller of the house is willing to transfer ownership of the real estate in return for all the money. The county wants to make sure that they get the property taxes correctly. The lender that's getting paid off is willing to release their interest in the property, provided they get the money. And the new lender is interested in loaning money as long as they secure their interest. So some of these things are kind of competing. They all have to happen in a specific order, and it's the escrow company that's responsible to make sure that all of those things happen in the way that they're supposed to happen with the exact dollar amounts. That is why the residential purchase agreement, the purchase contract, is also stated right on the front that it is the escrow instructions, because it's the template they use in order to make the transaction happen. Now, the second usage of the word is more of just as a concept to describe the process. We're opening escrow, we're in escrow, we fell out of escrow, we're closing escrow. It's just a term to describe the whole process from once a contract gets signed between a buyer and a seller and once the house is actually owned by the new buyer. Contingency. For a real estate contract, contingency means subject to, meaning an event that will only happen if something specified happens first. A simple example of the idea of contingency would be your ability to watch this video is contingent upon either YouTube being up and running or Facebook being up and running. If those things didn't happen, YouTube and Facebook, you wouldn't be able to watch the video. It's the same idea. The residential purchase agreement in real estate makes for 4 different contingencies on behalf of the home buyer. There are no contingencies on behalf of the home seller, meaning there are 4 different things in the contract that have to happen before the contract can completely close. They are interest rate contingency, inspection contingency, appraisal contingency, and loan approval contingency. Those are 4 different items in the contract that the contract itself is subject to. Initial deposit, also known as the earnest money deposit, this is the amount of money that accompanies an offer to purchase. In California, a real estate offer cannot be made without some sort of value accompanying it. Now, something of value could be a penny, because there is value to that, but typically, an offer to purchase will be accompanied by a 2% or a 3% earnest money deposit. So, a $100,000 house, $2,000 to $3,000 would be the earnest money deposit. It's very important to understand that the earnest money deposit, the initial deposit, is not the same thing as the down payment. Those are two different items, okay? Disclosure. For document purposes, a disclosure is merely a notification. When you're buying or selling a house or borrowing money, you're going to sign your name to dozens of disclosures. And a disclosure is simply a conveyance of information, and a signature on a disclosure isn't accepting the information, it's not agreeing to the information, there's no opinion or authorization other than, yes, I received it. Addendum. An addendum is an addition to an agreement by adding extra information to what had already been established beforehand. An example of an addendum might be specifying who the property inspector is going to be. So it's not mentioned anywhere in the contract, but it might be an agreement that JDB property inspectors will be doing the home inspection. You would put that in an addendum to the contract. An amendment is a change to a previously agreed upon matter. So an amendment is done to a contract or escrow instructions when something has changed. For example, if you were supposed to close on the 14th, but everybody's agreed that you would move it out to the 18th, that would be an amendment to the contract. Or the contract initially agreed that the seller was not going to give any money for closing costs, but later they agreed to give $5,000, that would be an amendment to the contract. APR versus interest rate. This is a mortgage-related concept having to do with the cost of money. So the interest rate is simply the price that the lender is exacting for borrowing money. The APR is an annual calculation of all of the costs that go into the first year of borrowing the money. So not only will that include the interest rate, it will also include things like mortgage insurance, closing costs, discount points, origination fees. All of those things are costs to a borrower in addition to the interest rate charged. That is why the interest rate and the APR, or the annual percentage rate, are always different. Now, from year 2 through the end of the loan period, the APR and the interest rate will be exactly the same, because from year 2 on, there are no other charges other than the interest rate. Agency. Commonly, agency is established when someone is authorized to act on someone else's behalf. In a real estate transaction, all the principals involved, the buyers and the sellers, will have to sign an agency disclosure. And what the agency disclosure says is that an agency relationship is established either just by performing as an agent or on the basis of a contract, is that there are specific duties that an agent has to their principal. Primarily, it is fiduciary in the sense that an agent has the responsibility to put their client, their principal's interests ahead of their own. Now, in between the principals themselves and the agents themselves, there are rules and requirements establishing their relationship, such as honesty and fair dealing, but it's a completely different standard between the agent and their principal. Essentially, they can share secrets. And they can talk strategy, things about which they do not have to share with the other parties. The way I like to look at it is like a coach. If you have a coach, they're going to share with you advice and strategies and plans that you're going to use against the other team. Now, the coach has to be fair with the other coach, but he's certainly not going to share the ideas and the strategies and the tips and the plans that he is using to beat that other team. That's what agency describes. And it also brings up the idea of why it's difficult for an agency relationship to be established with the same agent serving a buyer and a seller. They can't functionally do both. What ends up happening in those situations is that the agent ends up becoming less of a coach and more of a referee. They're shuttling information back and forth between the two parties, but they really can't function as an advisor to either of them because they've promised fair dealing and fiduciary responsibility to both. Now, obviously, this is just the very, very thinnest look at some of the ideas and phrases used in real estate. If there are other things that you have questions about, you can contact me. Also, if you would like to discuss with me the systems and the strategies that I use to help home buyers and home sellers in this marketplace, you can call me 949-413-2371. You can email me, michael@housamgroup.com, or right up here, it's on one of these sides. I think it's on this side. There's a little eye that's up on the screen on YouTube. If you click onto that, that will take you to a site, and we can set up a strategy session where we can talk about questions, concerns, plans that you might have for either borrowing, buying, or selling. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.